Say cheese.
Hi, let's quickly take a look at how do you control your robot. There are two ways you can do it. Using the computer that's right here, locally, standing in front of the robot, and the one using your remote admin tool. When you purchase the robot, or if you're administering one, then you have access to the online portal where you can, apart from doing administration, also do other things like events, set up the watermarks, etc. We'll talk about those in greater detail. For now, we're just looking at the way to accessing the robot using the remote controller that is attached to the robot itself. So here's the remote controller. You should have gotten something like this with your package. Let's turn it on. By the way, always make sure it's charged before you go to an event. So this is OCCO running, Model C. Software is the same on Model C and Model S. This is a March 2018 model. So you first minimize the window. How do you do that? You double tap. You bring the mouse pointer onto the screen where the live view is, and you double tap that live view picture, and the menu system gets exposed. Alright, let's quickly go through the menu system and the buttons and different options available in the application. It's more convenient to do it through the desktop recording rather than aiming a camera at the screen, so we will do that. What you see here is the OCCO application with the minimized window for live view. So we just, as you saw, we just double tapped on the live view screen and it got minimized. If I double tap again, it will get maximized. Double tap again, will get minimized. So we can close this application. If you start the application manually, then OCCO doesn't automatically start the live view screen. You would have to click it. Click this button, Start Shooting, in order for the live view screen to appear. If the OCCO were started automatically when you plug in the robot, then this live view window would be also started. So this is done for the scenario when you intentionally close the application and you want to open it to play with the menus, etc., without necessarily being distracted by the live view. So let's start the live view. And as you can see, the live view comes up and we have something in the background. Let's minimize it and go through our menu system. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on things that don't matter to you that much. Instead, we're probably going to focus more on things that you might want to change. On the very first screen here, those four controls are information. You may want to try and change this one. I don't recommend it because this is basically changing the resolution at which the DSLR shoots. Middle fine JPEG is more than enough for pretty much everything that you want OCCO to do. We know in this day and age we live in a 40 megapixel phone camera world, but trust me, it's not megapixels that matter, it's really the quality of the pixel. And middle fine JPEG is about an 8 megapixel photo that is more than enough for printing and of course for sharing on social channels online. So you're not changing any of those here. We proceed to buttons here. So the Start Shooting, you saw, it's this button simply opens up the live view window. We just demonstrated that. Printing setup. So this one is to set up a printer. So let's say you installed OCCO application on some other computer, not necessarily on your robot computer. You could use that as your print station. You would set up your printer, specify it here, after of course you plugged in your printer and installed all the drivers. You would specify your print template, either the one you made or the one that comes packaged with the robot. And here you paste the short code for your event. So for example, let's slightly increase the size of this window. This robot is shooting to an event called DRZV. So any computer with OCCO application installed, with printer enabled, if you paste this DRZV here, save and close, then it becomes an active print station. What it means is, no matter what computer it is, be that the robot's computer or another desktop computer, that computer starts monitoring your DRZV event, well, in this case it's called DRZV, of course your event will be unique. It will have a unique code. So you paste that code here, save and close, and now you have a printer ready to work. Okay, so if users were to print, then this desktop PC would become the print station. I'm probably repeating this too many times. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. But again, you could potentially install OCCO application on any other PC and just use it for a printer setup. Of course, in that case, start shooting wouldn't do anything because there's no DSLR or OCCO robot controller connected to that PC. You would only be able to set it up as a print station. So the next button is the settings. So this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. Luckily, there isn't much here that you need to change. Sensors, for example. Let's start here and go kind of left to right and then the top row. Sensors. So OCCO has two sensors, the depth sensor and the DSLR sensor. Or I should say a depth sensor and RGB sensors. The only value on this page that is kind of worthy of mentioning is this max distance. What it means is OCCO's depth sensor will ignore all subjects that are farther than 3 meters away. Okay? This is a distance in meters. That means that if somebody walks in front of the robot and that person is 3.2 meters away as measured by the depth sensor, the OCCO will not pay attention. So this is useful in cases where you have some tight spaces where OCCO operates and you don't want it to, for example, shoot some people who are kind of captive to the environment. So you may want to decrease that and that would prevent OCCO from just continuously shooting the same people over and over again. The DSLR section is obviously about the DSLR. We have several face tracker algorithms running at the same time. They have different strengths and weaknesses. If you enable face tracking, which by the way you can disable, in which case OCCO will only rely on its depth sensor, which works in complete darkness. But if you have enabled face tracking, then you have a choice of using either of the two face detectors that are coming with the OCCO application. I won't dwell too much on it. The only thing I'll say is that this first detector 1 is a very happy face detector, meaning it will detect a lot of faces, sometimes including things that are not faces, it will consider to be faces. So this works great in that respect. It will not miss many faces. On the other hand, sometimes it will see something that resembles a face and consider that to be a face. The face detector number 2 is the opposite of 1. It actually is very conservative. It will not call something a face if it isn't. On the other hand, it will occasionally miss a real human face. So both of them combined create a better together story. So in most cases, you want both of them checked. In some cases, where you see there are a lot of what is called false positives, that's when OCCO shoots too many photos of the same scene where there doesn't seem to be any faces, you might want to disable this one. Okay, but typically we don't recommend that. Typically the issues are somewhere else. You know, we're happy to help you if you have that sort of situation. This one is interesting. If you uncheck it, what happens is OCCO will shoot even if it doesn't see a face, meaning it will still use its depth sensor to track the subject. But as soon as the depth sensor determines that the subject is well positioned, it will trigger the camera. Whereas if this is checked, then the face tracker will have to vote or upvote before the shot is taken. So why is this even an option? Isn't it always good idea to shoot only when faces are visible? Yes, it is, except in the situations where you have some crazy face masks, like, I don't know, Halloween, where there's really not too many faces to be seen. In that case, you might want to disable this while still keeping those active, because in cases where there are faces, they will be used. But if there is no face, it will not be, the vote from the face detector is not a critical one. The voting on the shooting happens from the depth sensor, but the face information would still be used even in this case to do better tracking. This one is also interesting. Minimum face size to track. What it basically means is what is the smallest face that should not be ignored. So 0.12 means 12% of the frame has to be occupied by a face. If we were to make this, let's say 0.25, it means that a quarter of the frame has to be occupied by a face in order for the algorithm to vote. Oh, by the way, only in this case, of course. So in this case, when this is enabled and this number is high, you would essentially, again, limit the distance at which OCCO will shoot. This is not to be confused with the similar thing that we have for a depth sensor. So if you have this set to a long distance and this one to a large phase, what it means is OCCO will track a person at 3 meters, but will only shoot when the person approaches, very close. So 0.25 means probably 1.5 meters or whatever, 5 feet away from the camera. So let's put it back to 0.12. It's a good default. It's about 3 meters. So this is a very advanced section. We won't go into details here. All I can say is that those have been pre-tuned, and what they do is they determine how quickly the sensor converges in its voting. So all those are just way too advanced to kind of walk through in this tutorial. If you have any specific questions, write us an email. We'll be happy to answer that. LED lights, that's a quick one. If you bought a turnkey solution, this has been pre-tuned for you. Otherwise, you may play with this, put this number somewhere between 32 to 36 and have the lights go off. Let's say when you take a photo, you will quickly find the numbers that result in a very symmetrical behavior of those LED lights. Magnetic card activation, again, we're not going to cover it here. Administration is an important one. This one, the administrative email, is the email that will be used to send important notifications to. So we always recommend that you put support@occo.io into the CC so that we also receive those notifications and let you know separately or alert you. But in any event, if you choose not to do that, at least make sure that you monitor this email. So this would be your email now. Monitor this one because, for example, if you start running out of disk space, this is the email that will receive the notifications on that. This is obviously super important. Do you want this robot to be remotely controlled from your admin console? Almost certainly yes. Well, this has to be checked, and this field has to have your robot ID. And the ID you get from your remote admin console, which if you receive the turnkey solution, this has already been provisioned for you, so you don't need to worry about this. But if you are creating a robot from scratch and you basically install a new PC with the OCCO application, you would have to copy paste the robot ID from your remote console into this field. Of course, your documentation describes exactly how to do that. It's a trivial operation, but if you don't do it and then restart your application, then this instance, this robot, will not be remotely controllable. Those two, never change them. So this basically is used only for troubleshooting and debugging. And this one, please don't put a different number here and click OK, because it will quickly fill up your hard disk. It basically means capturing the frames that are being sent from DSLR. You don't want to do that. Watermarks are now entirely controlled from your remote admin tool, specifically from your events page. So we used to allow to do it from the local application, but now this is only done using the remote desktop, and there are several good reasons for that. I won't go into those, but anyway, if you try to change it from here, you will get this warning saying that please log into your admin console to change it. End user experience, this is also an important one. Do you want the countdown shown before the photo is taken? If so, then check this. And what's the duration of that countdown? We allow you to change that GIF, animated GIF that shows the countdown, but please make sure that the duration of that GIF and this number match. The GIF that comes with OCCO installation has already been tuned for this. So if you change that GIF, then make sure that you test the system and the user experience is correct. Delay while showing photo. So that's basically how long the photo should linger on the screen after OCCO takes a picture before going back to a shooting mode. So you know, this number can't be too short, because that way people won't be able to see the photos and kind of want to download them. On the other hand, if it's too long, then it just takes way too long for people to be able to take another photo and another photo. I think a good number here should be around, I want to say 4.5 seconds. So let's put 4,500 milliseconds. That's a good number. This one you probably never need to change unless you change the HTML that is used as sort of the front screen. So basically what this number means is how far down from the top of the window do you want this live view to be. So if we were to change this number to, let's say, 200 and click OK, then this would move up. So let's do that. There you go. See, so it moved up. As you understand, that height has to be tuned with the HTML that is displayed as an invitation for people to interact with the robot. So let's move it back. Let's go back. Let's move it back to 300. And because this is a screen recording, sometimes the live view doesn't update. Of course, the robot works just fine, but the live view takes a while to update with the screen recorder turned on. So let's go back to end user experience. So that's the live view. Do not shoot unless subject raises hand. So this is an interesting one. It works just fine. If you were to click this, then the robot would not take a photo unless people raise their hands. Of course, the problem is, unless you do something to communicate that idea to them. So for example, put it somewhere here, a message that says, hey, raise your hand for the robot to take your photo. Then people wouldn't know what they need to do. So it would appear that the head is tracking them, but the photo never takes. Obviously, you don't want that. So you don't check this unless you redesign the main HTML page, which controls the user engagement window. Enable sound. So if your OCCO has sound speaker device, then this might make sense. So right now we have two sound schemas installed here. So R2D2 is a default one, I think, that comes, and it just does those little robot tweets. Session duration in milliseconds. This number means how frequently do you want the sounds to be made. Let's say this number were 30,000. That would be 30 seconds. That means OCCO would not make sounds more than 30 seconds apart. That means even if it knows this is a good time to make a sound, if it already had made one 25 seconds ago, it will not do it. Why is this done? To prevent too much chatter. So sounds are something that can be annoying, and you have to make sure that you tune the sound in terms of the volume to be appropriate for the venue. So we like keeping this to around 10 seconds. Typically, that's what we do. And we're using the QR code based image access. So this is checked. So that's it. That's it for the settings. Camera behavior is very important, very interesting. So when your robot ships, this is the configuration that it comes with. It's shooting in TV mode. TV means shutter priority mode. So your DSLR's physical dial is turned to TV. The shutter speed is set to this, and it assumes that you're going to be using the flash to illuminate the scene. Now that's not always possible. For example, if there is no reflector, or if OCCO is set up such that in a place where flash is not appropriate, then you do auto control for the ISO. And in that case, you may want to dial down the shutter speed a little bit. What it means is now OCCO will use automatic detection of the lighting and properly expose the photo. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that you must disable the flash if you choose this auto mode. On the contrary, very often what we do is we enable the auto mode, then we put the flash in what's called a fill mode, and that is when very low output is used on the flash to slightly illuminate the subjects in the foreground, but still allow enough light from the background to enter the scene and therefore make it an appealing photograph. So in that case, what we do is, in order to not overexpose the photographs in the foreground, put a couple of steps down on the exposure compensation. That will be compensated by the flash in fill mode, and then the rest of the scene behind is going to be illuminated by the natural light. So this is a very common setting that we use. And camera behavior is probably one of the only windows and settings which are more convenient to play with right from the robot than using your remote admin tool. So this is probably one thing that you might want to kind of know how to do. Now, even if you're not in auto mode, you can still apply the exposure compensation to your liking. So for example, you put your DSLR into a shutter priority mode, which is how it ships. So you shouldn't touch anything. But then you realize that even with the maximum output of your flash, the photos are too dark. Well, you can increase those values. Okay, those are ISO at minimum and maximum distance. What does it mean? It means that OCCO detects the distances, and then this is the ISO it will use at the minimum distance. If the subjects were at like a couple of feet away, this is the ISO that would be used. And then it would be gradually increased until it reached 800 at 3.4 meters. So if we wanted to kind of boost the brightness of the photos, then we could increase this one, and maybe even this one, leave the same or increase this one. And now we have achieved what we want to do, which is we have a low output flash, but the photos are still properly exposed because we have boosted the ISO. So this is a fairly advanced thing to do, and you have to kind of do it on the location with a few trial and errors until you're satisfied with the results at all distances. At least 3 distances: very close, medium, and far away. So that's it. Let's not save anything here and move on to the robot control. This one is going to be really easy because it's really complicated. You should never change anything here. Literally, if you change things here, you may physically damage your robot. So resist temptation to play with those values. The only thing that is sort of like it could be useful here are the min and max position for the pan and for the tilt. What it means is those are some relative units that determine how far to the left and right or up and down should the head be allowed to move. So it doesn't matter what those numbers mean, just keep in mind that whatever it is, the default, that's 200 for a pan. If you want to have half of that freedom, you just reduce it to 100, you click OK, and you're done. So that means the robot now will only track to have the sort of amplitude that it was able to track before. The same goes for the tilt. And as you can see, for tilt, it's not symmetrical. It can actually tilt down much more than it can tilt up. Why? Because there are not that many 9-foot tall people, but there are lots of 3 feet tall people. So in other words, this is good for kids, and at 7 feet, this is, a 7-foot person from a meter away would be captured by this. So let's revert those back, or just hit cancel, so it won't be saved. And we're done with the main menus. Those I won't even talk about. Just don't use them. Those are for debug and troubleshooting only when we ask you to do so. If the tech support asks you to do certain things, they have absolutely no function for you. They are not used in any sort of operation, and they don't impact the behavior of the robot. So we won't talk about it. So that's it. Hope it was useful. There's more information in your manual. Please refer to that or ask us questions at support@occo.io. Thank you.